Vishnu Vishnu Paramahamsa Hari Vrajaka Charja Sto Talasata Shri Shrimad, His Divine Grace of High Charanara Vindbhakta Chandra Prabhupada, ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya, save the whole world, Shri Prabhupada Ki, Jai Nitya Vishnupad Paramahamsa Hari Vrajaka Charja Asto Talasata Shri Shrimad, His Divine Grace of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnavindi Ki, Namacharya Shri Rastakuri Ki, Brahmzakaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Sadhguru Bhakti Ki, Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shamakund Radha Kund Giri Govardhana Ki, Brajbhumi Shivindama Ki, Navadip Mayapur Dama Ki, Purusham Shetra Janapuri Dama Ki, Gangamai Ki, Jamunamai Ki, Bhakti Devi Ki, Tulasi Maharani Ki, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki, Jai Nitai Gopremanandi, all glories and glories, all glories and glories, all glories and glories, all glories, let it be to Sri Guru and Sri Guranga, all glories to the Prabhupada Ki Jai. Vishnu Jai, Krishna Jai, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Prashanda. We're on verse 31, is it? Yeah, I wasn't sure. Pata Vaishamyam Pashanda Pata Vaishamyam Pashanda Pata Vaishamyam Pratiloma Viveshanam Pratiloma Viveshanam Pratiloma Niveshanam Pashanda Pata Vaishamyam Pratiloma Niveshanam Jivasya Gatayo Yash Cha Jivasya Gatayo Yascha Jivasya Gatayo Yascha Yavati Guna Karmajaha Yavati Guna Karmajaha Yavati Guna Karmajaha Jivasya Gatayo Yascha Yavati Guna Karmajaha Pashanda Patavaishamyam Pratiloma Niveshanam Jivasya Gatayo Yascha Yavati Guna Karmajaha Pashanda Patavaishamyam Pratiloma Niveshanam Jivasya Gatayo Yascha Yavatir Gunakamajaha Pashandapata, the path of the faithless. Vaishamyam, imperfection by contradiction. Pratiloma, crossbreeding. Niveshanam, situation. Jivasya, of the living entities. Gataya, movements. Ya, as they are. Cha, also. Yavatihi, as many as. Guna, modes of material nature. Karmajaha, generated by different work. Translation. Please also describe the imperfections and contradictions of the faithless atheists, the situation of crossbreeding, and the movements of the living entity in various species of life according to their particular modes of nature and work. Responsively, please also describe the imperfections and contradictions of the faithless atheists, the situation of crossbreeding, and the movements of the living entities in various species of life, according to their particular modes of nature and work. Report. The combination of living entities in different modes of material nature is called crossbreeding. The faithless atheists do not believe in the existence of God, and thus their paths of philosophy are contradictory. Atheistic philosophers never agree with one another. Different species of life are evidence of the varieties of mixtures of the modes of material nature. That's the purport. So, in this section, probably going from about verse 23 up to about verse 35, I think, Vidura is asking a series of questions, and overall he asks around about 40 questions. And the answers to those questions basically constitute the rest of the third canto, the fourth canto, and it seems some of the fifth canto also. And so it's quite extensive questions. And we see here this conversation between Vidura and Maitreya. It goes on for quite some time. And essentially, you'll see that at the end of this chapter, that Vidura says to Maitreya, is actually, I'm only asking these questions with a view to understanding the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because that's really what he's about. He's not so much interested in all these goings on in the material world, but really his interest is to hear about the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And if we go back to the beginning of this section, which is discussing Vidura with his questions, we'll see that when he first met Uddhava, that's also what Uddhava was doing. Uddhava was discussing his pastimes outside of Vrindavan, then he discussed his pastimes inside of Vrindavan. And this is when he became sort of overwhelmed with thoughts of Krishna and feeling separation from Krishna. So Vidura obviously was feeling a little bit incomplete in this regard. Therefore, he was ultimately getting to this point of wanting to hear more about the pastimes of Krishna. So here in this verse, Vidura is asking three essential questions. He wants to know about the imperfections and the contradictions of the faithless atheists. So we see with atheistic people, and essentially it's most of the population is atheistic. Even we see some people, so-called religionists, if you actually look at what they're doing, you look at their practice, they're actually atheists. They like to wave the God flag, but they don't actually act as devotees of God. They don't actually, the things they do aren't, that the activities of someone who's a follower of God. And you see this is so common, like even you look at, in the US, that their money is printed on the bottom of the money. What does it say? In God we trust. But actually they don't trust in God, they trust the dollar. That's where their faith is in the dollar. Or you go to a place like India, for instance, and there's so much, so many, you go to a city like Mumbai, for instance, and there's so many, every region in Mumbai, because Mumbai actually years ago was a whole lot of fishing villages, and every village had its like local devata, its like village god, and so now it's just become a big metropolis. But everywhere you go in Mumbai, there's all these little temples. I know, for instance, in around Chowpatty, which is quite close to the beach along the esplanade there, and just down the end of the road, there's you go up the hill and there's a temple of what they call Babulnath. Babulnath's a form of Lord Shiva, but as you're going up, there's a temple of Gayatri Devi. There's a temple of who else? There's about 4 temples on the way up the hill. I can't remember them all. And then also there's another temple of Nataji. Not Jews. No, not Jews. Another form of Christianity. I remember one day sitting there making tambula for him. You get the palm leaf and you sort of pack it full of spices and things, and that was a nice service to do. But everywhere you go in Mumbai, there's temples. But ultimately, if you look at like they do their kind of it's almost like a duty they have to do. They have to come to the temple, bow down, things, but they're not really interested. They're not really interested to surrender their life. Where their interest is in things like, and you especially see this in a place like India, is movie stars, sports stars. Yeah, I mean the cricket. It's like these cricket players are like gods for them. So you can see that even though they're presenting themselves as being religionists, actually look at their actions, and as we know, actions speak louder than words. So you can see by a person's activities, you can see by where their attention goes, where their consciousness is really at. And so the path of religion is not really that prominent in the world. But if you look at the Vedic culture, the whole culture was simply focused around service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this is the point of Varnashram. Varnashram is not about establishing, farming communities or having village life or whatever. Varnashram, the whole focus of Varnashram is ultimately come to the purpose, to the conclusion of serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because it puts one, situates one properly according to guna and karma, so they can be peaceful, so they can focus on God. And this Prabhupada's one of Prabhupada's mottos, if you like, was simple living and higher thinking. What does that higher thinking mean? To think about physics, to think about all these kind of higher sciences? No, higher thinking means to think about God. Don't waste your time thinking about all these other things. Think about God. Live simply. Don't get caught up in this complicated technical lifestyle that is there in this day and age, and just use your time and energy to serve and to serve God and to engage your consciousness in thoughts of God. So here he's talking about these faithless atheists and the imperfections, and obviously we can see there's so many imperfections with the faithless atheists, and then talking about the contradictions. And I was reflecting on the contradictions as I was coming up here. I didn't really have time to research it too much, but there's a few references that I can think of that help us to understand this a little bit. There's a nice verse in the Mahabharata, which Prabhupada does quite a fair bit. Tako pratishta shutiya vibhinam nasho rishi yashamatam vibhinam dharmasya tapvam nihitam guhayam mahajana yenagata sapanta. It describes how, like, the Vedas are shutiya vibhinna. There's many branches in the Vedas, and one can't understand these branches simply by mental speculation or simply by postulating various theories. And then also it says Yasha Rishi, Yasha Matam Vibhinam, that a person is known as a Rishi when his view differs from someone else's. And you'll see in this day and age, not just in this day and age, it's always been there, but someone becomes a great philosopher because they've got some idea of what they think is, the meaning of life or whatever. I, over the years, I've gone to various yoga classes and stuff, and it's kind of interesting listening to some of these yoga teachers talking, because they've all got their own views on what is philosophy. But according to the Vedic texts, the philosophy is very clear. We are a conditioned living entity. We're an eternal servant of Krishna, part and parcel of Krishna, but because of our material desires, we are caught up in this material nature. But by practicing the process of bhakti, we can overcome this conditioning, we can overcome this false identity, and reinstate ourselves in our original constitutional position as a servant of God. The Vedic philosophy is very simple and straightforward. But then when you listen to these rishis, and as I was saying, a rishi is a person who's got their own philosophy. A rishi is known as a rishi because their view differs, or a muni is because their view differs from everyone else's. That's how you become a muni in this day and age. So there's so much contradiction. Also, there's another one. Ya shastra vidimuchyate vatate nasi. No, what's the other one? No. Utpatayaya Vikalpate. What's that verse? One's so-called practice of devotional service, if it's not done according to Pancharatri Vidimbina, if one's practicing their spiritual activities or so-called, and Prabhupada often translates it as so-called, meaning it's not really devotional service because you're not following the injunctions of Shastra. If you don't follow the injunctions of Shastra, then it's nothing but a disturbance. And we see this, like this. How many wars have been fought over the generations or over the millennia? The so-called religious wars. But one person's got their idea of religion, another person's got their idea of religion, and because I don't agree with your idea of religion, we'll fight over it, and we'll kill millions of people. And this what the Shastra says. Utpate. This is from Rupa Goswami. He says Utpateye Vikalpate. It means it's nothing but a disturbance to society. And this is the faithless atheists. They have no faith in God. They have no faith in the Shastra, and therefore they just do all sorts of irreligious and unwanted things, and they cause nothing but a disturbance in society. And that's what's driving the world now. It's just, and you'll see, the disturbances are just going on and on. And actually, there's so much result of these negative results due to their atheistic activities. We see, like global warming and all these disasters that are going on in natural disasters. I saw a headline yesterday. There's an insurance company in America. It's one of the bigger insurance companies in America, and they are supposed to be one of the major insurers in California. And so what they have concluded is they're no longer going to take on any new insurance policies in California because of the natural disturbances there. It's so prominent now that it's just an unsafe place to insure. And California, at least in America, is the center of sense gratification. They're all just focused on. I mean, it's a nice place. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been to California, but it's really, the weather is ideal, especially San Diego. The weather in San Diego is ideal. Never too hot, never too cold. Well, at least years ago it was like that. Now it's changing a lot. And actually, I think Driti was telling me that when they went to San Francisco, it was freezing cold, which is just really unusual for San Francisco. Usually the weather's always very nice there. And so we see, as a result of these natural disturbances, which are caused, according to the Vedic texts, which are caused by sinful activities, then it's becoming very difficult to live. And we see that, because of, I mean, the scientists call it global warming. Okay, fine, give it whatever title you want. But the reality is, due to the sinful activities of the living entities on this planet, it's disturbing the natural order of things. Everything has a natural order. Just like, when I was a child, you could predict what winter was going to be like, what summer was going to be like, what winter was going to be like. You could predict it. It was plain. It was always similar. I mean, okay, there were slight variations, but it was always quite similar. Now, it's like before I moved up here, like 15 years back, I lived in Melbourne, and sometimes it would snow in the middle of summer. That's not predictable. And it never did that when I was a child. We grew up in Victoria. It never did that when I was a child. And so many parts of the world you can see. You could predict what the weather was going to be. You could predict so many things about the natural order, but now you can't predict it. And this is due to the activities of the faithless atheists. And we'll see that it's talking here about the imperfections and the contradiction of the faithless atheists. So we'll see that this is being answered, especially in this chapter, this canto, the next canto. In this canto, you have the cursing of Jai and Vijay later on in this canto, and how they become Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, and the disturbances they cause. The disturbances Hiranyaksha causes are so bad that we see that the earth winds up going down to the bottom of the Garbhodak Ocean. This is due to the activities of faithless atheists. And then the disturbances of and it's kind of interesting, because if you analyze the story of Hiranyakashipu, you can see how people can think that these atheistic persons are great personalities. He was so powerful that he personally managed everything in the universe. He kicked out all the demigods. No, you didn't. The sun god, the moon god, the whole lot. He kicked them all out, and they all went hiding in the clouds and different things like that because they were fearful of Hiranyakashipu. And it was always spring by the power of Hiranyakashipu. It was always, the flowers were blooming, the fruits were growing, and the rains were nice. Everything was perfect by his arrangement, by his power. And so people would think, wow, what a great ruler, that everything is just so perfect by his power. You can see how people who don't understand philosophy, who don't understand the Shastras, could see how such a person is a great personality. But actually we can understand, he hated Vishnu. He was a dyed-in-the-wool sworn atheist. That was his. He hated Vishnu with such a passion. He hated God with such a passion. But that was, if you understand, if you as we go through the pastime, you'll see it comes up. That was choice, because he had 3 births as an atheist or 5 births as a devotee, and he thought, no, I want to get back to Vaikuntha as quick as I can. So he took the choice of being an atheist, and he was Jai and Vijay were such powerful atheists. They were actually fighting with God. They were such powerful atheists, and Hiranyakashipu was extraordinarily powerful. You just cannot imagine how powerful he was. And also we see in the 4th canto there was a story of King Vena, also another atheist, and he was a horrible person. He was actually persecuting the Brahmanas. He was, so many nasty things he was doing. And in the end, the Brahmanas, they all gathered together and they pronounced this mantra, Om, and they killed him. Brahmanas are very, very powerful, especially, not so much nowadays. Brahmanas, in this day and age, it's practically impossible to find a Brahmana. Okay, we get Brahman threads, we get Brahman Diksha and stuff like that. But really, are we Brahmanas? Not according to the Vedic definition. A Brahmana, one of the things, there's many things I could discuss, but one of the things a Brahmana could do is light fire with mantra. No matches, no kerosene or anything like that. You just chant a mantra. Agni mile purohitam. Just burst in flame. I remember one time doing a fire sacrifice for some sannyasi. It was really funny. He had, what was it? I can't remember the names there was a liquid and a powder, and you put the liquid in the cotton ball on the bottom of the fire, and you put this granule, this crystal on it. And so he'd get me to chant the mantra, and the thing had burst into flames, and everyone's looking at, wow, he must be a Brahmana, it's just chemicals, that's all it is. But we see that these atheists, they cause such a disturbance, and this is the point that Rupa Goswami is making. Utpatayaiva kalpate. They just cause a disturbance in society. That's all they're doing. And you see all these great leaders, so-called great leaders around the world. What are they doing? They're doing nothing but causing a disturbance in society. You've got this war going on in Ukraine right now, and all it is you've got one leader in this country, another leader in this country, other leaders over there. What are they doing? They're causing a disturbance. Thousands and thousands of people are dying as a result of their policies. That's not good policy. Good policy would mean that thousands and thousands of people are coming to the process of Krishna consciousness. Thousands and thousands of people, millions of people are waking up to their original identity. But they're doing the opposite. They're reinforcing this materialistic identity that aham mameti, that I'm this body. I'm a Ukrainian, I'm a Russian, I'm a this, I'm a that. That's what they're doing, is they're reinforcing these misidentification. Whereas someone who's actually a leader will help a person to understand that I'm not this material body, I'm the eternal servant of God. Whatever form of God, whether it's Krishna or whatever, it doesn't matter. But they would help reinforce that identity. Their society would be based on serving God, not based on serving the country and getting involved in these wars, over land and stuff like that. So not very intelligent leaders. And of course, also later on, we see it talks about at the end of the 4th canto. There's this really interesting conversation between Narad Muni and Prachanabhahishat. And then, because Prachanabhahishat was a very, very materialistic person. He was performing. He was a very qualified and very powerful and greatly advanced king in many ways. But he was also very much into fruitive activities. And actually, the name Prachanabahi means one that's done so much yagya that the earth is covered with kusha grass. Because the Brahmin priests, they sit on kusha grass when they're doing the yagyas. And so he was really materialistic. And then Narad Muni decided to come and save him from this desire for fruitive gains. So then he told him this allegorical story of Paranjana. And this story of Paranjana is talking about this person who's completely materialistic, and talks about how he lived. I think the city was called Chandavega. It was the city of the 9 gates, and it was actually an allegorical story, very, very beautiful allegorical story. And then talks about how he became a woman in his next life, and then he's talking all those different, and then became a goat, and then at one point, I think it was Prachanabahi, he kind of realized, actually, I'm that goat. He realized this was him that Narad Muni was talking about, because Narad Muni couldn't just come out and say to him straight, look, you're in Maya, you need to get out of this. He had to tell him this, and Narad Muni is expert at this. He explained to him how he was becoming caught up in material life without even talking about him. He was talking about this allegorical story. He explained this allegorical story, and from that, Prachanabahi realized his situation. So this is the point there. And another interesting point that Vidura is asking about here is this pratiloma niveshanam. Now, this means there's 2 types of marriage. There's anuloma and pratiloma. Just like we hear, like there's this anukulini krishnanushinam. So there's activities of anuloma, there's anukul, and there's activities of pratikul. So anukul means favorable, pratikul means unfavorable. So also anuloma means a marriage which is appropriate, which is what would you say? Like the qualifications of the man and woman are compatible, whereas pratiloma is the opposite. And there's a few examples. For instance, Ramaharshan. He was Ramaharshan, an interesting story there. He was actually, before the Bhagavatam was starting to be presented, he was sitting down at Naimisharanya to speak to all the sages. But Lord Balaram came upon this scene. Everyone stood up to honor Lord Balaram because he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I mean, naturally you're going to stand up, except one person, Ramaharshan, because he was sitting on the seat of honor. He was thinking, well, I don't need to do this. I'm sitting on the seat of honor. He actually became proud because of his birth, proud because of where he's sitting. And Balaram said, well, you're just a sutta. Sutta means someone who comes from mixed marriage or pratiloma marriage, and you're proud. And he said, therefore he killed him. He just took a blade of kusha and he touched him, killed him. This is the power of God. But it was only because he was proud of his birth, and therefore he shouldn't have been in this situation, that he was killed. And then his son Sutta Goswami then took his position, and his Sutta Goswami is very, very qualified. And we see, like, particularly in this day and age, it describes in the scriptures how when the marriage is anuloma, then good progeny results and good outcome results from the marriage. And we see traditionally in Vedic culture, for instance, divorce was very uncommon. It just didn't happen at all. Marriages went for life, and the affection between the husband and the wife was so strong. And I know, like, in this day and age, because the whole infrastructure is not there to support the whole situation, that it's very difficult to implement things like that. Also the thing with Varnashram, very difficult to implement these things in Kali Yuga because there's no support at all. The society is not geared for it. The people don't understand it. It's not going to work, But you'll see in Vedic culture whereby the marriages were arranged. But it wasn't just like for some financial, benefit or whatever. It was because the parents, they did astrology, they had qualified astrologers. I mean, that's another challenge in this day and age, is to find a qualified astrologer. They've all got, you can ask you can go to 10 different astrologers, right? And they'll all give you 10 different outcomes. And each one of them have a little bit of something right. But that's not a qualified astrologer. A qualified astrologer will be able to sort of tell you everything from your previous life, to what's going to happen in this life, to your future lives, just by reading your chart. So this sort of, like I said, this support network is not there anymore. And so, but what would happen is the marriages would be calculated based on the nature of the man and the nature of the woman, and what is the most compatible arrangement. And even we see the astrologers will be able to predict the outcomes of the marriage. And so what we see happening in this day and age is sometimes it happens, or actually often it happens, that a woman may be more qualified than the man. And this creates a certain psychological problem, because the man, it's just the psychology of the man, generally speaking, is the man wants to be in the dominant position. It's basic psychology. But the psychology, I remember years ago there was a devotee in France. His name was Keishi Shatru, and he had a reggae band, devotee reggae band. And he wrote this song, which was about Kali Yuga. The point he was making is in this age, the women all want to be the men, and the men, I think the line was, can only remember when. It's just talking about the mixed up. Huh? What was the line again? The women all want to be the men, and the men can only remember when. I guess he was saying can only remember when they were men. I don't know. I'm not sure what his point was there. But the point that he was making really is the mixed up nature of this age, is we don't actually understand our natures properly. The scriptures talk about it, but then how do we apply it in this day and age? It's not very. I mean, I remember there's things where Prabhupada, when Prabhupada would very strongly talk about this sort of stuff, and he would sometimes talk about women's roles, men's roles, and it was never, especially with the press, it was never very popular. They didn't like it. And one time, he was talking. There was this lady reporter who was interviewing him, and she was wearing a miniskirt, and Prabhupada was making comments about it, and she was questioning him having a bald head, and he said, "Better a cool head and warm legs than cold legs and a hot head." So the thing is, like, in this age, it's very difficult to implement, or try to, as a society, implement some of these. The guidance that's given there in the Shastra, but at least we should understand, if we can do these things, it's going to help us to live a peaceful life. Because the whole focus of Vedic culture is to serve God. And that's our constitutional position. And if we're situated in our constitutional position, we'll become peaceful. But if we're in a situation where anyone who's ever been in any sort of relationship conflict can understand how disturbing that is. Like, I was speaking to someone yesterday, marriage just broke up after 19 years, 3 kids involved. The guy was practically in tears. And it's just very, very disturbing. And, as Kali Yuga goes on, you'll see that marriages just won't last. And people don't even get married that much these days. And it's just the nature of the age. It's very disturbing. The whole age, and it talks about this in the beginning of the Bhagavatam, how people are always this praying up. This is above all, they're always disturbed, and that's the nature of this age. Everywhere you go, practically every person you meet, they're disturbed about something, and that's the nature of this age. And this is why this process of Krishna consciousness is so important. Prabhupada said it will save the world in its darkest hour. This process of Krishna consciousness is so important because it helps people to understand who they are. It helps them to understand their actual duty in life, and it helps them to become peaceful. Because following this modern life, you will not know peace. You will not experience peace. You won't even know what peace is, let alone experience it. Because you're thinking, the goal of life is to have a big house in the suburbs, a boat in the driveway, a nice car, a car for you, car for your wife, TVs in every room, the latest computer, the latest watch, the latest phone. This is what their goals, their ambitions are, to have all these facilities. And I saw something that the other day. It was I think it was just like anyway, it was a period sort of thing. And there was this Western town. There was this guy selling washing machines and fridges. They were a new invention. And the couple comes up and he's explaining to me how this is going to make your life so much better. And the guy turns around, he says, and the woman was really into it. She's saying, "Oh yeah, this is great. I'd love to have these things. I don't have to work so hard. You just press the button and wash the clothes." And the guy says, "Yeah, but then I'll have to work all day to pay for it." And that's what's happening. It's like just like you look at the price of rent these days, how much rent costs. Just for a small house in Mooloolah, you're going to pay $600 a week rent. And how much work you got to do to pay for that? So you just spend your whole life working to pay for all these facilities, and oftentimes you don't even really need them. Your Netflix subscription, your this subscription, your that subscription, your internet subscription. You're paying your whole life just to get these things that really, do you need them? Can you get through your day without them? So this is the way life is going. It's just become so expensive just to live in this world. So people are constantly disturbed. They're constantly, I remember years ago I was in is it Chadstone or something in Queensland? No, shopping. What? Huh? Huh? No. There's the shopping centre I was in Queensland. Huh? Chermside, probably Chermside, yeah. And I was just in the car park, and there's this guy coming out. He's got a handful of bills, like these big long bills in his hand. He's like holding his head like this, and you can see what's going on in his mind. It's like, how on earth am I going to pay for this? And that's what it's like. Is people are struggling in this world because they've got no idea of what the truth is, no idea of what the purpose of life is. And that's why this Krishna consciousness movement is so important, because we can save them from this difficulty. We can save them from this terrible life if they simply take the Krishna consciousness. Yeah. So, yeah, I'll leave it there. Any comments or questions at all? Ram Prasad Ji, our best of artists. Just something I'd like to say. You know why the deities, apart from the fact that it's Krishna, you know why the deities look so beautiful? Because Prabhu paints them. He's a very, very talented artist.
So you were talking about Hiranyakashipu, and he hated Lord Vishnu, but we understand that all good things come from sacrifices to Vishnu, and that if that's not going on, things are withheld. So how is it that he had the whole place eternally spring and everything was taken, you know what I mean, if he was such an atheist?
You're so powerful. You're so powerful. And you see that in this world, there are powerful people, and they control everything. They've got their whole domain and they control everything. He was very powerful. He was a control freak. And he just had everything, by his power, he just had everything under his control, and he didn't need, his power was such that he didn't need the devatas to do things. He was, sometimes Prabhupada calls him the Adidaitya, the original demon. He was the most powerful of all demons. But he was an atheist, so what was the use of it? And that's the point. It's like you can be very powerful, you can be very qualified, you can be able to do so many things in this material world. But if you neglect Krishna, Yenye Ravindaksha Vimuktamanina, as this describes in the 10th canto, that Patanti Yada Yushmadangraya, they fall down. Why? Because they neglect the lotus feet of Krishna. So it doesn't matter what position you wind up with in the material world. You can be the most powerful person in the material world. You can be the president of America or the king of this or whatever. But if you neglect the lotus feet of Krishna, ultimately it'll bring about your demise. And that's what happened to Hiranyakashipu. He neglected Krishna, and he fell down from that position. And that's one of the main points of that story, is what happens when you neglect Krishna. Yeah. Nadaji over here has a question. Nandu.
Thank you for the class, Prabhu. I know some Christians sort of believe that there might be, there's going to be many false prophets, and that there might even be a prophet that would come that would hoodwink a lot of people. I don't know if that's said in the Shastra, but that just came to mind about Hiranyakashipu, that it's good to be aware of these people claiming that they are, godly, and then they won't be. So.
Yeah, but the thing is, religion needs to be based on, as Rupa Goswami points out, he says it needs to be based on the scriptures, not on what we think. And that's the problem of what's going on in this day and age, and it's been there since time immemorial, really, is people have their interpretation of what religion is. But if it's not based on the instructions of Shastra, I mean, we have three, what we call checks and balances: Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. So it's just like with anything. It's like, there's a thing you can find. I used to live in Victoria when I was young, and Victoria was a big gold mining area in Australia. I think most of the gold came out of Victoria back in the day. But there's this thing down there called einparites, or fool's gold. And when they were panning it, because a lot of the gold you get is alluvial gold, you find in rivers and stuff like that. And when you're panning it, it looks like gold in the pan. And they think, oh, eureka, I've struck gold, But actually it's just einparites. It's not gold. So what you need to do is you need to have the gold assessed by a person to understand what it is. So my point being is that there's ways and means of understanding what is gold and what is not gold. Or the same as there's ways and means of understanding what's a diamond and what's not a diamond, even though you can cut glass to look like diamonds. And so if it's just based on external perceptions, then there's a good chance you're going to be deluded. But if it's based on Guru, Sadhu and Shastra, then you'll be able to understand the reality of what religion is. And that's why the Bhagavatam, right in the beginning of the Bhagavatam, I think it's the second verse, is it? There's the Dharma Kaitava. It kicks out all this cheating religion. The Bhagavatam is not presenting some cheating religion, because how's that going to help the people of this age? The point of the Bhagavatam is to help the people in this age, to help the people in this very unfortunate age to understand who they are and what their duty is, what their connection with God is. That's the point of the Bhagavatam. So, if you want to understand religion, then you follow the scriptures. Yeah. I hope that was answering your question. I didn't really hear everything you said clearly.
Hare Krishna, yeah, thank you for your class. Yeah, it definitely seems like everything's getting very watered down, and you're saying that we need to know Bhagavatam, so it seems like we'd have to know Bhagavatam very well to be able to preach, but it's almost like even our devotees, or our second generation devotees or third generation devotees, are starting to do their own thing. Yeah. Just whatever it could be, always wearing their hair out, just whatever it could be.
Yeah. Yeah, but some are doing that, some are not. Okay. Just like you talk about second generation devotees, there's actually a third generation devotee I know, for instance, Radhika Raman Prabhu. His parents live in Boise, Idaho. His father's the temple president, his mother's the pujari there. And I mean, he's a genius. He did his PhD thesis on the teachings of Jiva Goswami, particularly the Sandarbhas. And like you can listen to his lectures, and his lectures are like, wow. They're just like really, really inspiring. There's also another devotee down in Melbourne, Gopa Vrindesh Prabhu. His devotees are parents. Parents are devotees, and his class is just amazing. So you'll see that it's not that everyone is going to take to the process. It's not that everyone is going to be, a Nityasiddha devotee. But all it takes is just, Prabhupada said, it just takes one pure devotee to change the world. And we see, one pure devotee did change the world. Look what Srila Prabhupada achieved. So all it takes, and because the process of bhakti is so potent, it just takes one person to take it seriously, and you can bring about substantial change. And so that's our aspiration, is just to take the process of bhakti seriously.
So it comes down to our own choices, and some people might think we're fanatical, or, Yeah, but
you don't want to be a fanatic.
Well, to follow the rules of the Bhagavatam is fanatical. isn't it?
No, I mean, you're a realist. You understand what's going on in this world. You don't want to continue the process of birth and death. Fanaticism comes from people who don't understand Shastra. Yeah? Because you also have to see that there's gradations. It's not like it's all black and white. And this is like, you look in the 12th chapter of the Gita, you see how Krishna, he explains what is the highest thing in devotional service. Then he gives all these gradations of, but if you can't do this, do this. If you can't do this, do this. If you can't do... So the main thing is to be connected with Krishna. So we see with our youth, some of them are not so connected with the process, but they're connected to some extent. They like to come here for kirtans. Fantastic. Let's encourage that. Okay, they may have hair, they may be wearing pants, whatever. But they're chanting Hare Krishna. They're taking Krishna Prasad. They're associating with devotees. At some point, that's going to trigger for them, and they'll surrender. Maybe not this life, maybe next life, who knows? But if we start to get on their case and say, "Oh yeah, but you're not so fired up. You're this, you're that," what will that do? It'll push them away. They'll go somewhere else where they're accepted, where they're loved. So the point is not to judge people. If you want to judge anyone, judge yourself. Because if we look in our own hearts, we'll see there's so many anarthas, we'll see there's so many shortcomings, and we're so far from Krishna's lotus feet. And that's where we need to do the work. Because, if we are inspired in the process of bhakti, I was saying this, I was giving class yesterday, it's also, there's a nice statement where Krishna says to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, just try to understand this so others will take it seriously. So if we become enthused in devotional service, it's just like, there's that story that Prabhupada, when the devotees came to see him in Canada when they were going to the UK, and he told that story about Charlie Chaplin, where Charlie Chaplin was at the dance and he got his, Anyhow, so the point is that Prabhupada was encouraging them to be enthusiastic. And so if we're enthusiastic in the process of bhakti, it's contagious. Srimad Nanduji.
So just like going off what
Hold the
Sarada
microphone a little closer so you can hear.
Going off what Sarada Mataji was saying as well, I think, is it safe to say also we should find the balance, like we shouldn't judge other people if he's wearing pants or she has her hair out, all this stuff. We shouldn't think, we shouldn't lower our standards, we shouldn't, fall down, even though we're not judging them, we shouldn't lower our standards.
Definitely not. No.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is,
yeah, it's hard. Yeah,
huh?
yeah, because it's in one. Yeah, it's in like an internal war. You're thinking, you're not judging them. By not judging them, you're gonna, you can lower your standards down, so you can.
But the thing is, like, understand what it means to associate. Yeah. So a person can give others their association. This is discussed especially in the 11th canto. This is discussed in a bit of detail. You give association, you take association, and Rupa Goswami talks about this. This is how you achieve pure bhakti. So you associate with like-minded people. So that means you function on the same level. Yeah. But when you're dealing with people who are not so enthused or not so advanced in Krishna consciousness, don't take their association. Give your association. Because take their association means you do the same things they do. And it may not necessarily be very conducive to the process of bhakti. It may not be helpful to you to do that. Just like, it talks very strongly at the end of the 3rd canto about this, I think it's chapter 32, where it talks about, this Bhruvi Jimbrena Kevalam, to be associating with persons who are attached to women. How dangerous that is. Or to become attached to women, nothing against women. But works both ways. And Prabhupada does define that in the purports. It works both ways. Men attached to women, women attached to men. It's dangerous for the body, because you're trying to enjoy the body. This is very, very dangerous. And also to be attached to people or associate with people who are attached. It influences you, and then what happens is you'll become attached. So the idea is to understand how to give and receive the association and who to do it from or who to do it with. When the sadhus come, we all should be eager to hear them speak, because this is how you associate with the sadhu. You should hear them speak. And they speak the absolute truth. They speak the knowledge of Krishna. And this is purifying the heart. But if you go and hear some Mayavadi speak, Mayavadi Bhashashunari Hayasavanas, everything's destroyed, according to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You hear the Mayavadi, this thought goes, just like, we were talking the other day about, there was some criticism was going around. If you listen to people criticize others, then you'll become inclined to criticize others. So the thing is, like, when people start to criticize someone, just walk away. You don't need to hear this rubbish. And so what? People have faults. Show me the person in this world who doesn't have faults. We've all got faults. Just accept that and just work on overcoming these faults. But what's the benefit of pointing out the faults in others? It's like the news in the evening. You see how everyone else is suffering, it makes you feel good. Because I'm not suffering as much as they are. So when you hear about everyone else's faults, you feel better about yourself. But that's not the right way of doing it. Feel better about yourself by becoming Krishna conscious. No point finding fault in others. That's easy. Any fool can find a fault in somebody else. But what can you do about it? Yeah.
I don't really know how to formulate this question, but so we shouldn't criticize anybody, but sometimes there are situations where we need to correct a person, and I sometimes observe that it's just like, oh, we shouldn't criticize, so we look away,
Yeah.
Like how do you differentiate, I guess? How do I ask this question?
I think I know where you're going with it. So there's an interesting story. Is one time Satsvarup Maharaj was in Calcutta, and the kitchen, used to be. I remember that kitchen. It was a really gross kitchen, but the way they used to clean the kitchen is they get the broom. They used to sweep the floor, and they just sweep all the benches down. And then Satsvarup Maharaj went and complained to Srila Prabhupada about it. Srila Prabhupada was in his room there in Calcutta, and Prabhupada said, "Mind your own business." My role, my service in ISKCON is teaching deity worship. But when I go to temples and they don't want to hear, I don't say anything. Because I just then become an unpopular person. And the idea is to be able to help wherever you can, be able to guide people on how to do things properly. But first off, they have to be willing to receive that knowledge from you. So that's the first. You don't just shove the knowledge down their throats if they don't want it. They have to be willing to hear. And that's there's even the situation with guru disciple. If the disciple is not willing to hear, the guru doesn't speak. That doesn't give them specific instructions. They'll give generic instructions, but they won't give specific because they're not willing to hear. But when the disciple is willing to hear, and this pariprasena sevya, when they have this submissive attitude, then the guru will give the knowledge. But if they're not submissive, So first thing is it your position to give knowledge, and are they willing to hear? Because if it's not willing to hear, it just creates tension. And what's the use of that? Okay? Okay. Huh? Oh, one more.
2 points in glorification of Srila Prabhupada, and also one in glorification of Srimad Bhagavatam. The first point you mentioned in God we trust, you find it on the dollar note.
Sorry?
The US dollar note, you find it Moscow, in God we trust.
Yeah.
And Srila Prabhupada was 1976, he wrote to the secretary of the President of the United States. He wrote to the White House a letter, and you mentioned in that letter that please, dear Mr. President or Secretary of the President, please cooperate with this Krishna consciousness movement because it is a prime benediction. And you mentioned on your dollar note that after 200 years of independence, of the Declaration of Independence, 200 years ago, that it got your trust. You seem to be trusting in the dollar. So we encourage you to trust in this Krishna consciousness movement. Srila Prabhupada was sending me the boldness, the enthusiasm to send a letter to the White House.
Yeah.
It was in 1976. And then we read in Srimad Bhagavatam at the very beginning, the preface, that the Srimad Bhagavatam's purpose is to unite humanity at large, to have one base of one human society that is the base in trust and that is based in our consciousness. And the question would be, how can we proceed? How can we have full faith in that? How can we have trust in this message of the Srimad Bhagavatam? And how can we slowly but surely eradicate the atheistic tendencies in our lives?
Well, the Bhagavatam itself explains this. Shrinvatam Swakata Shrinvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana. That by regularly hearing the Bhagavatam, it cleanses all these things from that, almost to nil, it says. So by hearing Bhagavatam, by reading Bhagavatam, by speaking Bhagavatam, the heart becomes purified. When the heart becomes purified, then that faith is there.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki, Jai Nitai Go Premanandi.